The topic tonight is poetry, and we are fortunate to have Shirley Blackwell as our speaker this evening. She is going to be speaking, her title, Contest Castles of Limerick and Haiku, is actually only a part of her total planned presentation this evening. She's going to be describing about how haiku has changed over the years. I mean, it's no longer the little thing that it always has been. There's now a lot more options, and how they will be judged, modern interpretations, as well as being a member of SouthWest Writers. Shirley has served on the board of the New Mexico State Poetry Society and as president from 2009 to 2011, and on the board of its parent foundation, the National Federation of State Poetry Societies. She's co-founder of Blackberry Peach, which I don't understand what that is by her thing. She'll have to tell you what that means. But it's a prize for performance poetry. And also another type of competition, the National Slam Competition. She has published 2 poetry collections, plus numerous poems, columns, and essays in anthologies, newspapers, and journals around the country. So, without further ado, let's learn about some poetry. Where'd she go? There she is.
I'm here.
Okay, take it away, Shirley.
Okay. Well, can you see me? And can you hear me well enough? Okay, good. Um, I have been looking forward to this for some time because I have done classes before, in especially in Limericks for grade school kids through the just because my grandson, his teacher found out I was a poet, asked me to come and fill in on one of those days near the end of the semester when the teachers were all just, bummed out from a whole bunch of testing, and had 2 weeks to go until summer vacation, and they didn't want to have to teach poetry, but it was in the curriculum. So they asked me in, and I had uh, the wonderful experience of spending 2 entire mornings, a Monday and a Thursday, with the entire uh, combined 5th grade classes at Ann Parish High School, or not high school, elementary school. And anyway, I found out, and I'm going to tell you tonight, that if 5th graders can write limericks, so can you. And and there are some other things in that I've used this with. And I'm sorry that Lisa wasn't here earlier, because when we start talking about humor in poetry, limericks are going to be where you're going to find it every single time. But the reason that I did want to talk to you is because Rose and I we did look at this idea of having the Poetry Society grade and judge, I will say, the contest that you have coming up. And when Rose described to me her ideas of what haiku was, it sounded very much like what most Americans believe haiku to be. And there have been some changes. I wanted you all to know that, so that you will know how the judges who are going to be overseeing these different contests are likely to judge your entries and what they'll be looking for. And so, just to give you a little insight into how it's done. Now, I know I was scheduled to talk about haiku and limericks tonight, but I think I want to make just a word or two about free verse, because free verse is not something that you can just do anything in. what you find oftentimes that people will call free verse, to some, well, in many ways, it doesn't really measure up to uh, what poetry is, because poetry is more than rhyme and meter. And rhyme and meter and form, uh, prescribed forms, are pretty much what describes or what defines uh, what you would call uh, formal poetry or form poetry, or, you know, the traditional things that people think of as poetry. Free verse is really, I would call it more free form, because for me, verse, that pretty much is a form in itself. But if you get rid of rhyme and you get rid of meter in free verse, you've got to have something there that takes it from just just prose that is broken into lines, and elevates it a bit from straight prose, and touches that chord that says poetry. There are lots of devices in poetry besides rhyme and meter. Um, and some of those, I'm sure you've heard, you you're all writers, you've heard a lot of these before. Imagery, metaphors. Even if you're not writing in meter, you need a certain cadence to poetry. It should be something that sounds musical. And I have to tell you, some of these are my own biases. I know they are, but a lot of my colleagues agree with me on these. It it can't just be prose chopped into lines. That won't make it poetry. Um, I brought a couple of examples tonight just to give you an idea of how uh, unmetered, unrhymed writing can be poetry. And one of these was the winning selection. I judged a contest not long ago that was for a manuscript of poems. And I was, the imagery that I got in this particular publication was just, I mean, everywhere I turned, I saw these wonderful, vivid images. And this, the name of this manuscript is Of the Earth and Other Desires, a Poet's Phonology. And it, I, well, I'm not going to, I'm not going to give you the author's name just yet, because the award hasn't been presented yet. But I just absolutely love some of those. Here's one called House Sparrows. Where the snow vaults like a limestone stile over the overgrown yews, a choral of house sparrows has lately fluttered and perched and departed, leaving us to marvel at the mysterious new law to rival Hammurabi's, the natural cuneiform of claws and wings. And I hope that you can visualize that beautiful image. And then I I don't want to I a lot of my stuff tonight is going to be my own work, because that way I don't violate any copyright things. And so one of the things I'd like to read here is is from one of my own poems called Sands of Time. This one was in Levi Romero's poetry anthology, the first ever published by the New Mexico State Poet Laureate. And it's just called New Mexico Poems. And anyway, the Sands of Time is written about the El Morro Monument, Inscription Rock, or whatever you want to know about it. And it's so amazing that your upcoming May challenge is this thing of doing something from the landscape, because that's what I did for this one. And so I'll read a little of it. To live in the land of enchantment is to live centuries apart in the same moment. Here past and present stroll hand in hand like old lovers. So it is in the root of a grand sandstone promontory, the Zuni called it Sina, the place of writings on the rock, or the Spanish called El Morro, the headland, and early Anglo-Americans called Inscription Rock, where history and prehistory, eternity and change dance an unending fandango. I'm going to skip a bit. And at the end of it, it's a long poem. I won't give it all. It talks about how people have come and left their names there and want just to be remembered. A drumbeat echoes in my chest and throat. An elusive memory or forgotten need grows sharper and more urgent, as if flint or steel blade longs to burst free and fling itself toward the future past now, to carve, no, recarve its unique signature deep, deep, deeper into the standing stone. Now, that's not rhymed or metered. I hope you heard a cadence. I hope you heard, you got some images in that. There were some poetic devices in there of like something. That's a simile. You've heard of similes, and they are used all throughout poetry as one of the devices. And so anyway, that's just a quick little touch on free verse for your contest coming up. Make sure it sounds like poetry, even if it doesn't look to the uninitiated like poetry. Okay? All right. Good deal. Now we're going to turn to haiku. And I'm going to spend more time on haiku probably than we do on limericks, because that's where the most change has come about, I believe. Oh, and by the way, I would like for this tonight to be interactive. So if you have a question or want to, you know, challenge anything or ask me to clarify, please raise your little icon hand. And Rose, are you the one who's are you are kind of running this, or can somebody else recognize anybody who wants to speak? If you want to interrupt, raise your hand and somebody let me know. Okay.
Shirley, I'm running the stuff back here. So if we get anything in the chat, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mhm.
I'll be happy to stop and clarify anything. Okay, now a lot of you, I mean, well, I don't want to make accusations. I want to say what most Americans believe is that haiku is a 17-syllable poem that has to be arranged in 3 lines of 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and 5 syllables. Again, I would say that that is a wonderful way to train yourself. It's kind of the training wheels of haiku, if you want to know that. And it's a wonderful discipline for any writer, I think, to follow a form that is really very strict. But once you have kind of got that, I had a little practice with that, know that you can go further with haiku. Actually, going further with haiku means going shorter with it, because that's what happens. I would say to keep that standard model for haiku as your as just kind of a framework. Don't exceed those things, but don't be afraid to go smaller. The whole idea of haiku is to get something as concentrated as possible, um, that and as full of meaning as possible. In fact, I have this wonderful, lovely um, thing that came out of some of my Google research. It says that haiku is an art of expressing much and suggesting more in the fewest possible words. And I tonight I am going to give you some examples of that uh, after we've talked a little bit more, though. Okay, so the the reason that haiku's been around since, I think, at least the 1600s. uh Basho was writing in the he was writing actually in the 16th century, so it's been around longer than that. I know it has been, um it has gone through many changes over that time. It didn't really come into popularity in the United States and the Western world. Um, there were some early examples of it in the early 1900s, and there were a few famous poets like Ezra Pound and Emily Dickinson, even, who did a little bit of haiku writing. But it was really kind of after the Second World War that it really took off in the United States. And what what this Japanese form of writing is built on, and that was the classic of it, was 17 of what they called on or on. I don't know how it's pronounced. It's just the word. It's spelled O-N. That's it. The thing about it is that in Japanese writing, those are two different characters. Just that one little one syllable word requires two different characters to express how the O is pronounced and how the N is pronounced. And so what you got were these, you would get these different, you might have a long string of characters to just describe almost a one syllable word. So the idea of tying together 17, it was like 17 little ideas, or 17 little parts of an idea expressed in Japanese, translated into 17 syllables for us. It was the closest equivalent, but it's really very, very artificial. And the whole point of haiku is not to measure anything out. The important part of haiku is to take two images and to put them together in such a way that it creates a great deal of thought. It makes the person think. And another thing that is true in haiku is that the poet steps back and out of haiku. Haiku is supposed to be objective and observant, and to create, to foster thought, but not to necessarily give an answer. And I'm going to read you from Modern Haiku Journal. This, if you want to really get a good understanding of all of the different Japanese forms of poetry, if you ever decide to do it, go into the Modern Haiku Journal and look at their guidelines. They give wonderful definitions there. And I'm going to read just this little part of it because I think it says it better than I can. Haiku is a brief verse that epitomizes a single moment. It uses the juxtaposition of two concrete images, often a universal condition of nature and a particular aspect of human experience, in a way that prompts the reader to make an insightful connection between the two. The best haiku allude to the appropriate season of the year. Good haiku avoid subjectivity, intrusions of the poet's ego, views, or values, and displays of intellect, wit, and facility with words. The above is a normative definition, and haiku of various kinds not squaring with this definition can be easily found even in the pages of our journal, and maybe we can talk about some of that a little bit later. But, okay, that's haiku, and there used to be a split between that and something called Sinryu, which is in the haiku form, but it talks more about human nature, oftentimes more about human foibles, or that's where a little bit of humor might enter in. And anyway, but the Modern Haiku Journal itself discontinued separate entries for haiku and Sinryu because so much has, I mean, the barriers have just kind of faded between them. And so anyway, I think that maybe I will give you now some of those examples of haiku, just so you can kind of see it. And if you want to notice, in almost all of these, they don't keep that strict 575, that's 575 pattern in them. A few years ago, I went to a workshop, several day workshop in the Ozark Mountains, and I was fortunate to have as one of my classmates, if you'd like to put that, a fellow named John Han, and he was, I was told that he had been ranked as the second best haiku writer in the United States. And so anyway, he puts out this little journal called Firefly's Light, and he's at the University of Missouri Baptist University or something like that. And anyway, so every year he puts this out, and he has some of his own poetry in there, and he has some of his students' poetry in there, and a few guest writers. And he did ask me to contribute some of my poetry, and I did. But I wanted to read some of these examples in here because I think they do what haiku is supposed to do, and that is look for the juxtaposition of images, and maybe just a little bit of a turn in a little different direction than you might expect. Oh, let me tell you this also while I'm thinking about it, as I'm looking at this thing, and I realize haiku is not titled. How many of you knew that? Any hands? Okay, all right. It's not titled. You don't capitalize the first line in anything. You don't even you don't even capitalize it when you start out with it. Um, when you start the first line, you don't use punctuation in it, except occasionally you're going to have a dash or something like that that requires it. But don't worry about punctuating your haiku. It's going the ends of lines become their own pauses and so forth. And anyway, yeah, I wanted to tell you that. And the plural of haiku is haiku. We don't have haikus, okay? And so, okay, that's just something to keep you, you know, keep you looking like an expert before anybody discovers perhaps that you're not. Okay, here we go. This is by Nancy LaChance. Golden carpet swept in piles curbside, now charred ashes. And it's typical in reading haiku in a crowd or with an audience to repeat the haiku because they are so short, and it gives people a little more time to think about them. So here we go. Golden carpet swept in piles curbside, now charred ashes. Here's another one by her. Clouds bring needed rain and killing flood, double-edged sword. And let's see. Okay, here's one by Terry Jacks. Eclipse. Sun's new attire. Moonshades. Eclipse. Sun's new attire. Moonshades. And the other thing that haiku used to demand, and it's still a good idea, is having some indication of what season of the year it might be. Now, the Japanese had a whole trove of particular words that had pretty specified meanings to identify the different seasons. I mean, cherry blossoms were always a springtime thing. You know, I think frog denoted also was a spring symbol, but they had a kind of a compendium of these things that were acceptable. But if you can put in something that that hooks this to the seasons, then that is another mark of a good haiku. Okay. Harvest. Corn and pumpkins. Maple colored moon. And I will give you the last one. These are more traditional. And then we're going to go to some that are a little untraditional. Fall. Across the field, hobgoblins two-step. And this was another of that. Fall, homecoming dance. Across the field, shadows, two-step. Okay, so, I mean, I could read these all night and you'd get bored as all get out. So, let me ask if there are any questions now, and then we're going to go and take a look at a couple of other sorts of things. Rose.
So you were saying that they don't necessarily do the 5-7-5, and that's obvious by what you're saying. but they're also still like less than 12 total syllables. They're all really, really short. Is there ever a time when they're longer?
Oh, yes. Yes, you can have one word that has several syllables. Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking? No, that's not what you're asking.
Not a word. I mean, every one of those poems themselves is like a total of like 12 syllables still. It's still very short overall. You know, are they still supposed to be only like 3 lines, regardless of the number of syllables? Or do they have several stanzas to making one haiku? Or what?
No, a haiku is traditionally 3 lines. However, as they have gotten shorter, uh, they have there are now 1 line haikus. Haiku. Sorry, I'm being a bad person on my own. Let me read you something by our very own Scott Wigerman. How many of you know Scott Wigerman? He's an Albuquerque poet who gets around quite a bit. I guess Scott doesn't write much besides poetry because he's so good at what he does. Okay, he just won 3rd place in an international poetry, I mean haiku contest with this one-liner. The chilly silence of snow angels. The chilly silence of snow angels. And here is okay, here is one that is 3 lines. Typically you still are going to have 3 lines in a haiku. And I would say, if you're going to have a 3-line haiku, don't exceed on any line the 575. That's just a way to keep it there. What people are looking for these days is, they say usually the best American haiku are about 12 syllables, but that's not hard and fast. In May, there's an event in Albuquerque that's been going on for several years called the Poets Picnic, and for that event, people are asked to write haiku-like poems that are then put the calligrapher Escribiante, the calligraphers club, and a bookbinders club. They cooperate with the poets, and they put these tiny poems on strips of grocery sack material, basically, is what they do. They calligraphy them on, they put them into a beautiful little calligraphy book with art, and they sell them at the Poets Picnic to benefit the open space area where we have this Poets Picnic every year. And so anyway, when Scott and Dale Harris are the 2 people who run that every year, and what they ask for is the ideal poem they will ask for is 10 words maybe. And here is one. I don't remember the author on this, but I remember the haiku because it is so poignant. It's 6 syllables and 5 words altogether. Just war, counting the dead. So you can get a lot of emotion and power into these haiku. Just that's the idea, is to do as much of that as you can. Anyway, I'm going to read two more. I'm going to read the first and second place winners in this same international contest, in which Scott came in third. And then I think if you have any more questions or you want to hear a little more haiku, I will find out about that. Otherwise, we'll go on to the limericks, okay? All right, so the first one, stargazing. A firefly drips through the dippers. Stargazing. A firefly drips through the dippers. That's by Edward Huddleston, who's a U.S. citizen. I'm going to ask if anybody or what your reactions are to some of these things. So let me read that one again. And if there's anybody out there who would like to tell me, how does this make you feel? Or what do you think about it? Or what does it make you think of? Let's do that and see if if these haiku can evoke that response in anyone. Stargazing. A firefly drips through the dippers. Anybody? Okay, I can't. I guess that's not. You're covered up by Judy's. uh,
Anybody that wants to can unmute and respond to her.
uh-huh.
My first response, most of the haiku that you're giving me has some good imagery to it. This one, to me, doesn't make sense and doesn't really evoke anything that, it sounds like somebody's trying to define what a firefly is, and dripping through the dippers. Okay, I'm getting the dippers are out in the cosmos, the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, but at the same time, okay, something dripping through them, and it just doesn't, to me, doesn't make any, I would say that one would be a bad one because there is no good imagery to me that makes any sense.
Does it make sense to anybody else? And
Oh, it does to me. Girl Scouts, Girl Scout camp, laying on my back, stargazing. I'm from Iowa, so we have fireflies, and watching fireflies going in and out of the constellations. I loved it.
I liked it too, but I don't like drips for a firefly. I think that was put in there for the rhyme, and a little reason was sacrificed.
Okay.
One of the things that I would find as a poetry judge disconcerting was the similarity of the two words, which sounds very childish, and as trying to make something that is too cute. So while I can appreciate the as Brenda said, lying outside and seeing the fireflies above your head, I would find this not to be a winning haiku.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Is there someone? No. Okay. Here's an image that I got from that, and at first, yeah, the use of the word drips in there was unusual. Oh, Sam, are you saying no? You're not. You're just scratching your head. Okay.
I know, but I wouldn't complain if it had been zips.
Yeah. Well,
Or the word drifts, but drips in the sky.
Well, if it is a Big Dipper or a Little Dipper that is filled to overflowing, a firefly might be a drip from that almost. That's where I looked at that one. You know, I'm not, I kind of agree with some of the rest of you. I think that the word drips in there, it seems a bit out of place. And I don't know. And this is true that no matter how you cut it, anytime you judge poetry, there's going to be something subjective in there. Every judge has a particular lens that they look at things through. And yes, it is, I have submitted the same poems in 2 years running to the same contest. Didn't change anything except the judges. And 1 year I got nothing, and the next year I did. It is that kind of goes with the territory. But okay, and then here is the second place. A string of, this one is done, let me tell you first, because I think it matters. This one is done by Chenu Liu of Canada. It's 15 syllables. A string of prayer flags holding the night breeze, letting it go. A string of prayer flags holding the night breeze, letting it go. How do you feel about any of that?
I thought that one was superior, especially with the juxtaposition of two things, that the prayers that are incoming and then letting them go with the flags, that is two things, both psychological and actual at the same time. Therefore, I would have judged that highly.
I really like that one.
Yeah.
It made me, again, the letting go. Yeah, that's part of what we do in prayer.
Yeah. But let me read that one of Scott's again. And let's see how you feel about it again. The chilly silence of snow angels.
I don't find snow angels silent or chilly. I find them a matter of friendship and doing something fun with others and making fun of the winter. So no, I wouldn't have gotten that one, but that's a subjective thing, not an objective choice.
Right.
I got the message of it, but I felt it was too short. It sounded more like a definition rather than an image. It was more like somebody's trying to define what one is, and most of these, there should be more to it than just a dictionary definition.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Okay. Well,
it felt like something was missing. Because it just drew me to there, and I'm like, okay, there should be another couple of words.
Okay, okay, so I'm going to read a few more in here. I'm going to read some of my own, if that's okay with you. Grit, generating growth, giving us a pearl. Grit, generating growth, giving us a pearl. And I have thick skin. You can say whatever you want to say.
Didn't understand the words.
She said grit, like something
Grit.
gritty, grit.
Yes, as in a tiny piece of grit.
Hmm.
Okay. Grit, generating growth, giving us a pearl. Okay.
That
Yeah,
felt complete.
Yeah.
I
I
like
think
it.
you turned away from the mic. It was hard to hear at
That's
first.
what I know. I have that problem. That's why I asked. Yeah, when I turn my head to the side, unless I straight on. Okay.
But once I
Um,
heard it, I got a very complete image. So very, very nice.
Okay. Does a flower waste its fragrance on desert air? Ask the bees.
Ooh. Yeah, I
That's
like
a
that
good
one.
one. That's a good one.
Yeah. And in this old, old land, the second hand takes 1 decade at a time. In this old, old land, the second hand takes 1 decade at a time.
You have to think about that one, but yeah, I got there. You know, as to the
Well,
why,
yeah,
but yeah,
I think haiku should promote. It should make a person stop and think. I don't know that you necessarily have to get the joke the first time out. The whole idea here is uh, to make a person stop and think for a minute. Maybe let them think in a different way. If you can write a haiku that that makes people think in an unconventional way, a more creative or free way, then you've done them a service. And I think you've probably done poetry a service too. Okay. Poor beaver, damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. And let's see. And then I, for a time, I was having a great deal of fun looking at signs, road signs, business signs, whatever you wanted to do. And anyway, I will give you just a couple of these, and then we're going to turn on to limericks because, after all, that was the fun part of tonight. Right? Okay. Um, so the first line of each of these poems uh, was a sign of some kind. Okay. Comfort Dental Clinic. There, you'll be fine. So, Comfort Dental Clinic. There, you'll be fine.
sounds like a
Uh,
slogan.
and just a few. Snip ends family haircuts. Snip accepts only single customers. Of course, the thing is called Snip Ins, but it's Snip ends family haircuts. Snip accepts only single customers. And that's enough of that. Okay, so I just wanted you to know that there's more to haiku than you might have thought. Okay? So, any questions about haiku before we go on, if you want to, or shall we just jump into limericks, which are the fun part of the evening? Oh, Rose is telling me to jump. Okay, now I have told you all that I did a class for fifth graders, and there was one limerick that I didn't get to use because the age of the audience. But tonight, since I've got an adult audience, I get to do it. Okay. This is when I don't know who the author of this particular limerick was, but um, it's because it was just the limerick that stuck in my head, and I learned it years ago. So I can't give credit where credit is due. But it goes like this: The bustard is a marvelous fowl, right up there with the lark and the owl. He escapes, as you see, illegitimacy by the sake of one fortunate bow. So, and and that is fun to me. So I get to do that. But anyway, okay, so limericks, nobody knows exactly how they started. I mean, you've got one that goes back to a nursery rhyme. Hickory dickory dock, the mouse ran up the clock. The clock struck one, the mouse ran down, hickory dickory dock. Okay, so in the mid 1800s, a couple of people that you've probably heard of, Lewis Carroll and Edward Lear, were writing these wild little nonsense verses. As a matter of fact, that's what Edward Lear called. That was the exact title he gave to two different books that were published in, let's see, when was it? 1845 and 1872. Uh, he had a total of something like 212 limericks that he put out. Now, what the limerick was is it became a kind of a grassroots sort of a poem. It was very uh, usual, typical to find these in the ale houses and pubs of Ireland and other parts of the British Isles. And I'm sure that they soon moved to America because they were they started out as drinking songs and drinking contests. And what they would do oftentimes is they would throw out a line, and it very often included the place where they were. There was a young lad from ta-da, and it was up to the person who was challenged to make up the rest of the limerick. And if they could do it successfully, um, it involved drinking. Now, I'm not sure whether you got to drink if it was a success or you had to drink if it was a failure. But in any case, it's it was certainly something that caught on all over Ireland. And one of the places that it seemed to be most popular was Limerick, Ireland, probably because it's kind of hard to rhyme things with Limerick sometimes. And so anyway, uh, what happened is that it just caught on like wildfire, and people started doing it all over the world because it's fun and because it has a catchy rhythm. It has a very, it really has a complex rhythm when you really think about it. The best way to know how to write limericks is to listen to them, to learn how that cadence and everything goes. And so just listen to lots and lots of limericks to get that earworm going, that thing, so that you don't vary from it. Because if I am judging limerick, the one thing I'm going to look for the rhymes in the first, second, and fifth lines, and in the third and fourth lines to have their other rhyme. But what I'm really going to be listening for is whether you keep the rhythm, whether you keep the meter. And something that it's something that makes me uh, something that turns me off with both limericks and cowboy poetry is when somebody messes up the rhythm, most often by stringing it out too far. And they'll throw in a couple of beats that just don't seem to belong there. So I would say that, and then if you kind of hone in on the idea of the humor in a limerick, and some of the traditions to follow, and they make it pretty easy to write these things, is this business of really using town names, place names. That's one of the best things you can do. And so anyway, I am the way I taught the kids at Ann Parish this stuff, and it was that I just got them up there and I got them reading together, and they learned this by ear. That's the best way to learn it. And anyway, the kids did pretty well. I was there on a Monday morning. I gave them a challenge to write me a limerick. I told them that if 10 of them out of that whole 45 that I was teaching, if 10 of them could write a limerick, I would check in with their teacher and see if they had done it. And if they could, I would wear my dragon dress to the next Thursday's thing. And the kids seemed to think a dragon dress, what's that all about? And the reason I mention this is because, yes, I did wear my dragon dress. It's because I also wrote them some dragon poems that they could recite and would make them feel good too. And so, anyway, I'm going to read you some of these, and then if we have time in a little bit, what I will do is to we'll do a little bit of writing afterwards, or you can take it home and try it with whatever your town is, okay? But okay, so the towns down my way, I live in Los Lunas, and the towns down here are Bosque Farms, Peralta, Los Lunas, Rio Communities, and Belen. Okay, and I have a limerick for each of those. And so I'm just going to read them and try to get them into your ear, okay? And I may emphasize the rhythm of them just so you can kind of get that. There was a young man from Los Lunas who was a beginning bassoonist. In his carpool to work up in Old Albuquerque, he played loudly at passing balloonists. Okay, this is one. There was a tall lass from Belen who was so exceedingly thin, when she turned to the side, she looked 2 inches wide, and a flagpole said, "Are you my twin?" A bearded old man of Belen grew the craziest hairs on his chin. Each arrogant whisker curled tight as a twister, then ran straight when it tickled his shin. A Bosque Farms lad, name of Sam, preferred to make tacos with ham. When asked, "Is that kosher?" he answered, "Why, no, sir, but willing to eat them I am." A bridezilla who moved to Peralta approached her young man at the altar. The fright-stricken groom stood as stiff as a broom and asked, "Is there no way to halt her?" There was a young woman named Cleo who lived in Communities Rio. So closely she clasped a most poisonous asp that she dropped while still bidding adieu. 3 tenors of Communities Rio, saying limericks with gusto and brio. Some soreheads would boo them, but none could outdo them, that fabulous limerick trio. So those are some of the ones that we did. And I've had a lot of fun with some of the others. My husband and I went to Weiser, Idaho for the Weiser National Fiddle Contest. My husband is a fiddler. He's not of not at that echelon where he could compete there, but we sure had a good time. And one of the things that happened is this is a very rural place, and we were booking showers in what used to be the ladies' locker room of an old school. And somehow an owl got in there. And so we started having fun with that. I wrote limericks and nailed them to uh, the wall of the ladies' room, the ladies' locker room there. And so I thought I would read you a couple of those. Here we go. Here we are. There once was a wily old owl who might have been seeking a towel. He cried hoo hoo while flitting, but the ladies there sitting thought his comments both lewd and most foul. That darned owl just he came back and back. That darned owl just keeps dropping by. We can't get that birdie to fly. Perhaps he'd stop nesting if we asked the questions like who, what, where, when, how, and why. And so anyway, the thing about it is, I mean, you can do a lot with these. I wrote a crown of limericks. Now, a crown of sonnets is one that is linked. And I'll read just this one, and then I'm going to turn this back over to Rose because I know it's getting late. Okay, this one is called Stinker. There was a young preacher named Jack who kept sermon notes in a sack. As it happened with these, he stored Limburger cheese, but he filled up the church from the back. His habit was bound to cause strife, for his flock thought he should take a wife. Luckily, he wed Nell, who had no sense of smell, and the front pew now shows signs of life. The parish thinks Nell is a saint, to endure what makes all of them faint, for she does not disclose the plight of her nose, but sitting beside her, they ain't. You'd think that attendance would tank, but they still think Jack's sermons first rank. When he recalled the apostles, they all pinched their nostrils, disconcerting church guests, to be frank. Toleration seems absent these days, but we have to give Jack's church due praise. When they turn up their noses, it's not what one supposes. God works in mysterious ways. Okay, so that's kind of it. I just wanted to get that rhythm into your ears and to say read more limericks, read them aloud so that you really do capture the stuff. And for you who are writers and not often poets, I would just say that poetry is a great way to energize your brain. You use different sides of your brain. Well, you use both hemispheres of your brain when you are writing poetry or an essay or some other kind of literary genre. But what happens is that, and they have done tests on this, they show that when you're writing poetry, it fires up different regions of your brain. And that's a great way to break through sometimes if you have writer's block or if you have, you need a different way of coming at something and you've gotten too trapped into the words that you've already got on the page. You might try this. I have some friends who are novelists, and one of them told me a long time ago, she said, whenever I am in a difficult point in my book, and I just can't really think of anything else, she'll go off and she'll write poetry for a bit. And sometimes that will help her with a breakthrough. It also, it gives your brain a rest on to do that. it's like taking a walk in the woods. So often you can come up with other ideas if you just get your focus off of what you're trying to break through and can't. So I offer you that as a way to help your own writing, and I hope you have fun with it. And there's one other thing, and I will challenge you with this. It is said that the actual rhythm and cadence of limericks makes it almost impossible to write a dismal limerick, something about something kind of sad, and to make it sound sad. And so if you want a little bit of a challenge, try to write a dismal limerick. See whether or not you can get away with it. And I think that you'll find that kind of a fun thing. I wrote a couple of dismal limericks for a fellow. I don't know if you might not have known him. He was from down here. His name was George Forrest, and he gave us our poetry chapter that challenge one time. And so anyway, here we go. 2 dismal limericks. Our forests are burning, whoosh, whoosh. Smog gives climate change quite a push. We are in ill repute across the world, and to boot, the oil guys still want us to hush. A Russian brought war to Ukraine for reasons that should seem insane. The cause of the shooting is Vladimir Putin, a history spit on his name. That's my little political statement for the evening. Okay, so that's great. So any questions, or can I turn this over to you now, Rose? It's been a pleasure to be here. And it
Well,
was a pleasure getting ready. It was a pleasure getting ready.
great insights. I had a couple of questions. Maybe I misunderstood or whatever, so I want to make sure that I understand this, because you guys will be generally judging this part of our contest and stuff. And I was getting from you that it's that preference, or that the preferred thing when it comes to limericks is you have to put a place name in it, or that's just something that can be done.
That's something that can be done, and it is it's um, like putting a seasonal reference into a haiku. It's traditional. You don't have to, and so your poem and your subject matter should dictate whether you do that.
Okay, because I was looking online earlier and at a lot of different limericks. Maybe 1 in 10 or 20 had a place name. By the same token, there'd be some of them that had like about the same amount, 10% or so, 10 to 15% would have a person name. Like you had that one about the churches and all that, where they had a specific person name, and I didn't know if that is a preferred method of limericks, or if that just is a kind of a general, it's not going to be counted more or less because of those things.
It wouldn't be counted more or less. It is not preferred. It is honored.
Okay. Okay.
Did
anybody else have any questions? Sam, I thought I saw you looking quirky. No, he's fine.
Okay.
Well, I loved it. I of course, I really enjoy limericks to begin with, so that's a lot of fun, and I got some new insights on haiku, God knows.
Yeah. I don't want you to think that you can't succeed by writing 575. I want you to know that that you wouldn't be graded down if you didn't write 575. Not by any stretch. But just keep it. don't have your syllables go over that 575 per line. But if you want to write, because what happens a lot of times is you can see people throwing in A's and ands and thes just because they have to make the line, the length of it or whatever. So don't feel like you are required to do 575. You will certainly not be judged down on it if you don't have exactly that number in every line. But I will say again, that again is one of those exercises that can help you when you are trying to do a different kind of writing, a different kind of poetry, because just that rigidity of it sometimes can free up your other writing abilities.
I did want to comment earlier on that poem with the prayer flags catching the wind,
Yes.
and then the last line was "Let it go." Well,
Mhm.
some of the best haiku has a hidden meaning. So it's not only the prayer flags letting go of the wind, but also the narrator, the person, us, the reader, let it go. Was I think the double meaning in that poem.
Every good haiku should offer an insight or offer some way of thinking of something differently, and getting you out of that box that we all fall into sometimes.
All right, I've got one question in the chat. Will haiku be judged harshly if long?
If long,
Mm-hmm.
okay, yeah, you probably would. If you went over 17 syllables, you would probably be judged harshly.
But what about, like, you gave us that huge long thing about the guy in the church who farts a lot?
Oh, that was just stringing together all of those things, and that's an invention of my own. I just did it for fun, because if I wanted to, and I would say in the contest, stay with just one haiku, one verse. That each of those verses is its own haiku. Okay, and so anyway, yeah, it's I don't want to. Okay, there's something called a crown of sonnets, and anyway, it is basically about 15 sonnets all wrapped together. They kind of it's like the last line of one sonnet is the first line of another, and then it goes all the way around. And anyway, there are crowns of different things, different kinds of poetic forms. And so anyway, I just thought, well, gee, this would be fun if I wrote, uh, these linked limericks. And so one of the things that poets do is they make up their own forms. Uh, I have a book called Ditchbank Diaries that is about the acequias in New Mexico. Well, it goes all the way back to Babylon, for goodness sake, or Nineveh, I guess it is, where they actually had something like this. But what I did there was I took a Japanese form called haibun, and haibun is it's a little poetically written vignette in which an associated haiku is embedded. And it's and so I took that idea and turned it into something that I called Haiku. And it was because there of all of the connections with Spain and so forth, and the habanera, which is not only a chili pepper, but it is also a dance that started in Cuba and went back to Spain, became, so there's this flow across the ocean of all of this culture that had to do with the Spanish in Iberia and with the acequias and the how the conquistadors and the others came up, and when the Spanish colonialists settled in parts of, well, settled in New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, California, and places like that, they brought the ancient laws that had started over in the Iberian Peninsula uh, under the rule of the Arabs who were there way back when, and they brought it over here, and anyway, it became all of this fusing of so many things. So in this form that I created, what I would do is I would have I would have no more than 300 words of essay written poetically that that described whatever I was describing, and then I would have a 12-line, 12-element poem that went with it, and and it was a way to combine prose and poetry and research and essay uh, all together. But you know, poets love to play with words. I mean, they love crossword puzzles and acrostics and everything else like that. And they are going to play with words by putting them into new forms and doing all kinds of weird stuff with them. But I'm taking your time. I'm sorry. Rose, I'm turning this over to you because I could talk all night.